Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sasha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager here at the Seattle Public Library. And as we begin tonight, I want to respectfully acknowledge that we gather on the ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples, particularly those of the Coast Salish region. This includes the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot peoples, among others, who have lived in relationship with the land and waters of the Puget Sound since time immemorial. You can learn more about this at spl.org/equity. I'll also mention that as a library, we have really wonderful resources that are a great place to start if you're interested in learning about colonization and its impact on Native peoples and their lands. Welcome to tonight's program presented with KUOW Book Club, KUOW FM, and Third Place Books. I have just a couple quick announcements before we get started. We're grateful to the library series sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation and the Seattle Times for their generous support of library programs. Thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Their support helps the library provide free programs and services for everybody in our community, so we're very grateful to them. I wanted to mention that we have assistive listening technology available. It's kind of hidden behind the check-in table, but if you find that you need it during the event, you can just give me a wave. I'll keep an eye out and I will bring that to you. And there is going to be a Q&A after the event. You should have received an index card as you came in, but if you did not receive an index card, we will also have some available when we get to the audience Q&A portion, and you can frantically write your question and then we'll submit it for you. And then finally, many of you received a survey when you came in. Please feel free to fill them out after the event, and then you can return them to us as you head out into the evening. If you did not return a survey, I also have those that I can give you at the end of the event. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome KUOW's Katie Campbell, who will talk about tonight's program.
Thank you so much, Sasha, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. I'm very excited to be bringing this conversation to y'all. By the way, we were just listening to Medusa's Stare as y'all were walking in, so make sure you add that to your music list. Yeah, absolutely. I do also want to thank the KUOW live event sponsors, Finney Ridge Painting and Microsoft, for their support. And by the way, we are in the middle of our spring fundraising drive, so if you feel so moved this evening, you can give to KUOW using the QR code that I believe is right over there at our table. So find that on your way out. Any amount you give helps us continue to bring public media and beautiful events like this to our community. So thank you to everybody who is a member and to everyone who might become a member tonight. Without further ado, our special guest this evening is Sasha taqwšəblu LaPointe, the author of this month's KUOW Book Club pick, Thunder Song. Please come join me, Sasha. Apologies for my stumble. I'm very excited to talk to you. So, blending the personal and the political, Sasha writes with power and lyricism about Indigenous identity, resilience, and community, weaving together stories of trauma, healing, and creative expression. A member of the Upper Skagit and Nooksack Indian tribes, she is the author of 3 books and a distinctive voice of the Pacific Northwest. Her work explores everything from her great-grandmother's Lachute Seed language revitalization to the punk rock scene, Twin Peaks, and the ongoing reclamation of Indigenous identity in Coast Salish territory. And I just want to share that I picked Thunder Song for the KUOW Book Club back when it came out in 2024. I've been waiting for the perfect moment to have this conversation, Sasha. And this honestly feels like the right one for so many reasons. So much of what you write in Thunder Song and in Red Paint, I think, can resonate with a lot of people in this wild world we live in today. So thank you so much for being here. Oh, and if you turn that button on, perfect. Because I turned it off on you earlier. We're going to start with a reading. So please take it off.
Tigweed Seed, I raise my hands in thanks to you all for being here. And for those who are listening, and Tigweed Seed to you for playing the long game.
Thank you.
It worked out. And I will read a short excerpt from Thunder Song, but I've started implementing a new practice in my readings. I try to do this every time I get invited to a space to read, and that is to share a quick poem from another Indigenous baddie poet. And I do this every time as a way to kind of uplift other Indigenous femme writers and bring their voices into the room.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a poem by the incredible No'u Revila. She is a badass activist, educator, writer, and this comes from her book, Ask the Brindled. When you say protesters instead of protectors, by No'u Revila, I would call it a trick if it wasn't so terrifying. The way your mouth doesn't move when you speak, your smile, shiny as a church. But what kind of prayer could ever be trusted without evidence of a free tongue? On the rare occasion, sound shakes loose. Words, no matter how unmuzzled, words still go to die. In your mouth, even womb is wound. Sometimes I dream of tearing your throat wide open and finding there where stories should be born, only bleeding, bleeding, bleeding. The wish to desecrate. We are, yet again, portrayed by you, the girl, the native, the water, the mountain who was asking for it. Your lips so Sunday still. Sometimes I almost believe you. So it's best I keep hiding knives in my hair the way my grandmother, not God, the way my grandmother intended. So that was No'u Revila from Ask the Brindled. She's one of my favorite poets on earth. And I'll just read a short excerpt from Thundersong. In 2006, I watched my great-grandmother address a sold-out crowd at Seattle's Benaroya Hall. She climbed the wooden steps of the stage, her small frame draped in her wool shawl, and I watched as her father's painted drum was handed to a percussionist in the orchestra. My great-grandmother, my namesake, turned and addressed the audience. She spoke about the first people of this land. She talked about a need for healing. People, she said, her heart breaking for a wounded world, have lost their way. Her father's drum sounded. The first powerful beat reverberated like thunder. 14 years later, my mom sits at her desk, a mosaic of script pages laid around her. She's studying the opening scenes, the interviews, and the movements of the music. She's finalizing what will become the documentary of Grandma's Symphony. She looks up from her tiles and tells me, this must happen now. People need to hear this music again. The footage for the documentary has sat unused, dormant for all these years, until now. That spring, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, police officers murdered George Floyd in the streets of Minneapolis, protests erupted around the country, and cop cars burned in the streets of Seattle. My great-grandmother was 83 years old when she commissioned the healing heart of the first people of this land. She had been troubled by the world. Back then, in 2001, the news was all about George W. Bush's war on terror. She saw beyond the fear. She saw a country divided, the wars across the ocean, and the violent injustices in her own streets. She saw that the people had lost their way. She believed so deeply in our people's stories, the teachings inherent within them. She knew that no one would listen to an old Indian woman, that she would have to reach another way. Somehow, she arrived at what she called highbrow music, symphonies. This came as a shock to us. Great-grandmother hadn't grown up with this kind of stuff. She loved square dancing and Elvis. But she believed this was the way, that if all people could experience our beliefs through song, the music could heal the wound. She needed something that everyone could hear. She called a famous composer. I need you to write me a symphony, she demanded, and to perform it at Benaroya Hall. The composer turned her down. But weeks after the call, he couldn't get this 83-year-old Indian woman's voice out of his head. He called her back, and together they collaborated on a symphony, the first to be based on Coast Salish spirit songs with lyrics in Lushootseed, the traditional language. In our longhouse ceremonies, songs hold a spiritual power. There are certain songs for prayer, for healing. My great-grandmother had a cassette tape with recordings of 2 spirit songs. One belonged to a beloved cousin, and the other was Chief Seattle's Thunder Spirit song. She entrusted the tape to the composer with instructions to listen to but not share them. She wanted the songs to guide him as he wrote the symphony. She hoped that the healing power of these spirit songs would take shape in the symphony, and that when people heard it, they might be touched by that power. She was hoping for medicine, for a world that could change.
Let's give her a hand. Thank you for that. I'm so glad you started by reading that about your great grandmother, because I wanted to acknowledge your namesake, who is a huge presence throughout this book, Vi taqwšəblu Hilbert. You dedicated the book to her and wrote at the very top, quote, Vi taqwšəblu Hilbert believed in the healing power of music. She believed in our ancestors' Coast Salish spirit songs. My great-grandmother wanted to share that medicine with the world in the hopes it might teach us something. She wanted us to be better. She passed that hope down to me. This book is for her and for anyone who is ready to listen. And I think we are ready to listen. Are y'all ready to listen? Yeah? Okay. Come on. Thank you. Thank you very much. But Sasha, do you think the world has listened?
Not nearly enough. And I think if Grandma was here today, she would be giving out all kinds of assignments to us, to her relatives. She always had work for us to do. I think that she would be, like I said, like 20 years ago when the symphony was first performed, it was so necessary. And there's this beautiful documentary that LaChute Seed Research, my parents run the LaChute Seed Research Program, and I've sort of have been carrying it on since her passing. And they have finally completed that documentary and are showing it in places. And that is like giving me hope. It gives me like chicken skin. I'm like, to know that her vision in that and what she wanted with that music is finally, it's sort of like having this resurgence. They were able to perform it up at Western Washington College a few months ago, and then recently at the UW, and to kind of feel her vision and her spirit in the room with that music gives me hope, because back then it was necessary, and now even more so. It's not necessary, it's like demanded. So to answer if people are really listening yet, I'm so grateful for all of y'all and anyone who is, but and my grandma would be bossy and would be like, we need to make everybody listen. I am less bossy, but I'm working on it. But I think what like her vision was to reach like as many people as she could with our Coast Salish teachings in these songs, to inspire them to be better. And when I look around the world and what's happening currently, it is terrifying to be a human. That I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm so happy for the groups that are listening. But when I look around the world and see these injustices and see what's happening to our oceans and our waterways and our land, and people are still having to defend sacred sites. Children and families are being like torn apart. My own best friend who's coming to visit from the Northwest Territories, she's Gwich'in. She's coming to visit in a week, and she's actually scared as a Gwich'in woman. She says ICE is going to be at SeaTac, and that's terrifying. So when I look around and I see those things, and I see, Black and brown and trans bodies still being murdered and facing violence, when I see tribes still having to fight so hard to defend sacred sites from being demolished, when I see tribes still have to fight so hard for their just to be federally recognized, no, I don't think enough people are listening.
To say the least. You talk about how she felt that no one would listen to this old Indian woman, and so she created this symphony to get people to listen, and it's hard today to imagine people stopping to listen to her too. Like I can see why she comes to that conclusion. Do you feel that you've gotten different kinds of people maybe to stop and listen by continuing the work in things like Thundersong?
I hope so, because when I came to Thundersong, um, it was real wild. I was writing essays about this and that. I had crazy names for it, like in these early raw stages. I was just having fun with it. I was like, the whole thing's going to be a mixtape, and it's going to look like the book cover is going to be a tape. My poor editor was just like, uh-huh. And I was like, it's going to be in two parts, side A and side B. And in the early stages of it, it was way more music focused. And but then, I just finished and kind of clawed my way out of the swamp of sadness that was writing red paint. Proud of that book. It's a powerful book, but I am definitely very raw and honest when I say I literally like clawed my, that swamp that Atreyu and Artax are in, and Artax drowns. That's where I was for like 3/4 of writing that book, but I got through it, clawed my way out of that, and just wanted to kind of look outward rather than inward. I wanted to observe and write essays about things that brought me joy or interested me, rather than being so introspective. I wanted to observe and be a different kind of storyteller. But it just so happens when I clawed my way out of the swamp of sadness, the world was on fire. People were being murdered. A pandemic was happening all around us. And as a Native woman who's descended from people who survived the smallpox epidemic, the pandemic had us shook in a different way, So the world's on fire, people are being murdered, and there's no justice for it. And we're losing our elders due to this pandemic. I was like, okay, I'm going to shift away from my cute little mixtape idea. We'll just table that and maybe I'll come to it in a few years. But I started to think of my great grandma's work and how she felt. And it was so linked, because I could have just gotten swallowed by the darkness, gone into the swamp of sadness. But I thought, what would grandma do? Which is something I do like daily, like all the time. I was like, what would grandma do? Grandma wouldn't just like, you know, be away with the fairies and like, yeah, write a million songs about or a million essays and poems about Nirvana and like Sonic Youth and what they meant to you. No, you're not going to do that. You have something way more important to do right now. And the essay collection just completely shifted. And I knew immediately that I wanted to write. And that's why the title essay is Thundersong after her, after that symphony, because that's what got it started. I think I got so far away from your question. I'm sorry.
No, it was perfect, and it's led me down the right path because I want to talk more about how your great grandmother influenced you, and we came to this. And I hope one day we have this world that deserves the mixtape story because that sounds awesome, and I would definitely read a side A and side B. I think everybody here.
It was a good idea.
It was a good idea. I think we would all love some essays about Nirvana. We just might not deserve them right now as humanity. But I mean, your great grandmother was an incredible woman and expected you to be incredible. And I'll say too, for those of you who were here for Cole Thrush in goodness, what was that? February. Time is non-existent after the pandemic. He, at the end of our conversation, talked about how great you are, and also though about her legacy and how if it weren't for her work, even his work probably wouldn't have been possible in the way that he understands it. But you write about people recognizing you as Vi's namesake, sometimes first before they recognize you. What was it like to grow up with that kind of expectation to sometimes be a namesake first and Sasha second?
I love this question. Also, Cole Thrush is the coolest name ever. So I'm so flattered that he knew who I was. And in thinking about that, I know I write about it a little bit in Red Paint, but at the naming ceremony, I was just this little like nugget running around causing trouble. And I remember all of my uncles and aunties saying, "Oh, taqwšəblu number 2, what hard shoes to fill." And being such a young kid, I didn't know what they meant. And then as I grew older into teenagehood, I was kind of like, oh, that's too much. I'm not a language warrior. I'm not a storyteller. So it's been with me around my entire life. And I think that oftentimes she would I don't know, as a namesake, we were very, very close. I was like low key obsessed with my grandma growing up. Other kids would be like goofing around and running in the woods, and I would just be like at her feet like a cat, just like waiting for more stories. I was like the nerdy grandkid. And but during harder times in my life, when I was a teenage brat and teenage runaway, which if y'all have read the books, you know how dark that gets. But I remember coming home to visit her. It was Christmas, and all the family members were there having a party, and everyone was being kind of, oh, hi, Sasha, it's good to see you. At this point, I'm not living at home. Rarely see my family. I was in a bad way. I was as my dad likes to say, oh, when you're off being all crazy. And that's all he says about it. And I'm like, fair, Dad, fair. I came back eventually, but no one was really acknowledging anything. And I'm sitting next to, my like 70-year-old grandma, who is this iconic matriarch of our family, iconic storyteller. And I've got like a shaved head with blue lipstick and probably a latex skirt from that goth store on Broadway that used to be there, like, just appropriate 15-year-old attire, like for a Christmas event.
Totally.
And everyone else is just kind of like light and bubbly, making small talk. And I sat down by grandma, and she just took one look at me and was like, granddaughter, I can't see you. You're behind a veil. Oh. And I was like, I like put down my toast or whatever it was. I was like, what? And she was like, you need to come back. Oh. And then she got up and walked away. And I was like, and like left me with that. And like she could just know. And like that Christmas, she gifted me her old typewriter that she used to do her first language work on. And I hadn't even told her I wanted to be a writer yet. At that point, I was like, no, I'm going to run away to Seattle and be a rock journalist, but we hadn't talked about that. Those were all the words she said. And then she gifted me this giant, clunky, beautiful, it sits in my office today, typewriter that she used to do her first language work on. And that happened again and again in my, as my dad calls them, out there being all crazy years. She would just kind of reel me back in and put me back on the path. And no one else in my life really could accomplish that. My parents tried, maybe friends and aunties tried. But grandma had a way of like steering me back and kind of reminding me, you have a very important purpose. And I'd be like, is that just because you named me after you? And she was like, yes. like she kept it real. But as I grew older, I came to really appreciate that and came to be really inspired by her. And she's the reason I decided to, like in my mid-20s, leave Seattle and attend the Institute of American Indian Arts. I had a crossroads. One, I'm not kidding, this is not hyperbole, was to go join the circus and go on tour. I am not kidding. My life was weird in my 20s. And then, so I was trying to weigh this decision, got invited to join the circus. And then my grandparents sent me this pamphlet, go to college. It's a tribal art college. You could study writing there. And I like weighed my options. And even though grandma had already passed, I chose that. So she's sort of been, her name and her spirit have been guiding me and the decisions I make since I was a teenager.
Grandmas just know sometimes, or grandfathers for some folks, but I was close with my grandma too, and they just know things. It's scary. You might have noticed I took notes just now, and I think that's a good reminder to take your own notes and write your questions down on your note cards. We will be gathering those, and if you've got a question, you can kind of flag us down, and folks will come around and get those. But I wrote down, because I really loved how you said this, language warrior. That is phenomenal, and I'm stealing that. The headline for our talk now is already written. Talk more about being a language warrior, what it meant to your great-grandmother and what it means to you.
Yeah, I often look back. It's hard to know how privileged you are when you're in it. And by privilege, I don't mean, I think you can be privileged in many different ways. Our family grew up very poor, moved around a lot, ended up eventually in a single wide trailer in the woods in Swinomish. So when I use the word privilege, know that it is more of like a cultural privilege. And it's hard looking back, having the language around me. So I was just like, immersed in it. She had this beautiful room in her Seattle basement called the Brain Room. And I was just a little ass kid running around with my cousins being crazy, as you do, getting into trouble, like poking into rooms you're not supposed to poke through. But every time we'd run through go cannonballing through the house, we'd get to the Brain Room and we knew it was serious. Everything got quiet. All the grown-ups would look at us. I'd be like, oh, we have to back up, back up. And then we'd exit because that's where she did all of her like early language work. She'd be in there with her like amazing language students. She was teaching language at that point already at the UW. And so all of her lesson plans were written and built there. All of her transcriptions were done there. And to me, I guess what I'm saying when I mention privilege is since I was born, I've heard Lushootseed spoken around me. At every family gathering, Grandma would always address us first in Lushootseed, then in English. We'd gather around like the fire at like salmon bakes, and she would share stories. I thought this was just normal. I thought every kid got this. And when I grew older, I came to appreciate it so hard that like not every Native child gets to grow up with their language. And so I look at it as such a gift. And I think the things that she has done for language revitalization for the Lushootseed language is like so important. We have like full immersion programs now. Like I have like little cousins, nieces, and nephews who can come up and speak full Lushootseed fluently, and I almost like tear up because they have full immersion classes. We didn't have that. Like my generation, our siblings, like we don't speak fluent Lushootseed. It's a great deal of shame that I carry. I will fix it. I know several phrases. I'm learning slowly, but I think that that idea of looking back, she was a language warrior. Like she basically saved, she went around and recorded elders, like the last fluent folks, and then of course had a ton of help from like Tom Hess and other linguists and like a team of dedicated people that helped her bring the Lushootseed language into written form. And now like so many tribes are doing, and in different dialects, there's Northern Lushootseed and Southern Lushootseed. It's just really beautiful to see. And when I see, even where I live on the east side in Tacoma, couple weeks ago, I like walked out of my house and I saw that my street had been replaced with a Lushootseed word, and I like teared up because I was like felt Grandma's like spirit in some way. And so she's definitely a language warrior. And then I guess, well, I did just admit to y'all that I am not a fluent speaker, so I can't really call myself a language warrior yet, but I have been learning and having like tiny lessons here and there with my mom, especially when I knew I wanted to start incorporating it into my poetry. I bug my mom so much. I'll be in the middle of writing, it's like 10 at night, and I'll have to call her up and I'll be like, Mom, how do you say this? Like she's like, she is a treasure. And so I'm like baby stepping towards language warrior. Maybe by the next book, I'll be one.
I would argue you're already there, but that's for you to decide for yourself. And you may not be fluent, but you have some, really important words that you say. Like you talk about in the book in a later essay, how the first time you say "I love you" to your partner is in Lushootseed. Can you talk about why the difference and its own power compared to this English that we speak on this land now?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. Thank you. Not enough people ask about this particular essay, and I want more people to ask about this essay because it was a really beautiful one for me to write. What I appreciate about our language is that there are so many different ways to say I love you, and meaning different kinds of love. There's a great website. The Puyallup tribe has a language program and they do these short videos. You should look them up. They're so awesome. And they have like little mini videos, reels, the kids call them, right? The TikTok, I don't know. But they have they're an awesome resource for language and learning cool stuff. But in the different like dialects of Lushootseed, there's different ways to say I love you. And that just appealed to me so much on a deep, deep level as someone coming from surviving sexual violence at an early age, surviving sexual assault like throughout my life at different times. The phrase "I love you" is a really tricky thing for me. I don't love it. It doesn't come out easily. It comes out kind of clunky. And when I was first falling in love with my partner, I didn't want to say it. I was like, no, that's scary. It's loaded for me, and my mom and I walking down Swan Creek one day, she was wearing a shirt. I was like, oh, what does your shirt say? And she said, oh, taqwšəblu. It means I love you. And I was like, it means I love you? She was like, yeah, but not in a romantic way. It means I have compassion for you. I care for you. And of course, there is different ways that you can say, I desire you. I have romantic love for you in Lushootseed, which is great. And I do desire my partners. But it's important for me that unconditional love, that compassion felt at times in my life the way I wanted to communicate it, that felt safe for me. And I really love our language because in the English language, I love you just translates to one thing. And I think the idea of loving someone is so complex, and we love at different degrees, and we love with different desires. And so the fact that our language provides different ways to say it made my little, trauma baby heart feel so at home. And so the first time I ever said it to my partner, I said it in Lushootseed.
It's amazing. I think there's also very clearly love for music in this book. It might not have been the mixtape you were planning originally, but the impact music has had in your life and your love in some form or fashion for it comes through so clearly. Like when you talk about the Bikini Kill song White Boy, which I was like jamming to on the bus on the way here because I wanted to get in the right mindset for this.
You're an angel.
And your first book, Red Paint, the ancestral autobiography of a Coast Salish punk, has a lot to do with you finding punk music and the punk scene specifically here in Seattle. What was it about punk in particular that pulled you in and made you want to be, as you call it, a reservation riot girl?
I love this question, and I love that you were blasting White Boy. It is the best Bikini Kill song ever.
It's really good.
You are like my best friend now. I'm like, you are so cool. I think what drew me in, I'm going to try to give the Cliff Notes version because I can ramble. I can be Yap City, so I'm going to try to keep it under control. I think what first drew me in, growing up very isolated in the woods, over an hour from the city, like 40 minutes from Bellingham and over an hour from Seattle, where music was actually happening. So it felt like this out of reach sort of mythic thing to me. I would steal my brother's boombox. They'd get real pissed about this. And we only had like one crummy little Sony boombox. And I would lock myself in the bathroom, our little linoleum, like yellow single wide trailer bathroom for hours trying to learn how to make mixtapes. And I made like the worst tapes, cut songs off too much, or I'd have the song on 3 times because I'd get excited that it came on again. But I was listening to like alternative radio stations, and that was the first time. I like that you brought up White Boy because that was the first time I was like I was hearing things like Nirvana and the Wipers and Soundgarden, and I was like, what is this? This is awesome. The only 2 tapes I had were like at that age were like Madonna and Janet Jackson, both fire, by the way. Still have them. But the first time I heard Bikini Kill's White Boy, it like absolutely eviscerated me. And I was like, what is this? And it really kind of blew my mind open in that tiny bathroom about here's this woman singing in like sing-song, like cheerleader, like girly girl, and then going into this guttural scream. And I was like, oh my God, I found my people. Like she's speaking my language. And I also hadn't heard songs that are talking about sexual violence, sexual assault, rape. and the anger that we're allowed to have over these things. I was really young, and it was my first experience of that. And then it was over. I was cooked. I was done. I was like, I want to be punk. Like, I want to find this woman and anybody like her. I want to find bands. I want to find more music that is. I didn't know that we could talk about the things that happen to our bodies in such an empowering way. I was a child. And so in a lot of ways that saved me and sort of sent me on the trajectory of starting to like hitchhike. I'd go up to Bellingham and go to shows at the Show Off Gallery. I would like hitch rides to Seattle and go to like Deviate and the Rock Candy. I just became very, very enamored. But it all started with that little spark in the bathroom where I was like, I get to be angry about what happened to my body. Holy shit.
Yeah. The space to have this rage that was also art, it sounded like was huge. But what was really like knife to the heart, like reading Thundersong and Red Paint, was that the world that you found yourself in for yourself wasn't perfect, because much like the song was called White Boy, there was a lot of white boys in that space and a lot of white women, right? And you talk at length about just how white it was and still is. And on page 83, you write, eventually, this idea that I was a punk first and a native person second became unbearable. And I asked earlier about being a namesake first and you second. So now you're also talking about having to be punk first and native second. I mean, when you have all of these identities within yourself competing to be like the first spot, how do you find you? And how do you define, like, I am Sasha taqwšəblu LaPointe, damn it?
Great question. I'm like, I'm not sure I have that answer yet. I think it's always changing, right?
Fair.
We grow. Because this is an excellent example as a teenager, finally arriving to these places I had only like daydreamed about and being like, yeah, I'm here. I'm gonna like crowd surf and mosh and drink beer behind the alley. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. Wasn't all the time. And go see these incredible bands and hear like spoken word and saw zines for the first time. Like, you know, so many, like I was enamored completely and inspired. And then after a while, something did happen and shift in me, kind of taking a moment, and it's changed since then. And I'm so happy. But the punk scene I kind of fell into in the late 90s, early 2000s, I started looking around the room and I started becoming uncomfortable because I was like, where are the other Native folks? Like, I didn't see one Native person in the crowd. And then I started like clocking that a lot. And that's not to dismiss some of the very rad bands that I saw growing up, singing about, oppression, fighting against, like singing about stuff that mattered. But then I wanted more. I'm like, where are the Coast Salish punks? Where are the Coast Salish riot girls? Why isn't there a scene like on my res that deeply needed it, like someone passing out pamphlets on self-defense and how to get home safely? And so I started to kind of be like, oh, is this really for me? And that sort of started this inner conflict. And then I just started seeking them out. And at art school, I met Native punks and Native like goth bands. And I think the scene has changed massively since I was a teenager. In the 90s, it was all about like white boy anger and white boy, like, and it's changing now. Now I see Native punks and way more like queer punks and yeah.
Especially in Seattle.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you say earlier that you're not quite a language warrior, because I think you probably had something to do with that change, right? Because you were a part of the band Medusa Stare. I don't want to say that wrong.
Were.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought so. And this is a thing you dreamed of for years. I remember reading Red Paint, which I reread again in preparation for our conversation, and this moment of triumph when these women come to you and they're like, we like your work and we want to make work with you. And the music that you created, got to be the music you were looking for. What do you feel like you were able to say that the punks that came before you and after you couldn't voice?
I think being in Medusa Stare was such an amazing opportunity. It was wild. It was like so dreamy. Got to play in all these like rowdy venues, and we toured from Seattle to Boston, and doing shows, breaking down as you do along the way. And it was such a beautiful experience. To also feel in community with these folks, having dated and been married to a person in a band that it was not my band, right? I would go on tour, I'd help out, but I was just like helping selling merch. It wasn't really a role. And I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. But so it was a different vibe. It felt more like community with all of us. It felt like family, and also the opportunity to have a voice on stage. And so I performed spoken word and eventually started doing backup vocals and eventually started incorporating my traditional language into those. And that, I think, is what the biggest gift Medusa Stare gave me, was like, here is the Coast Salish like punk that I was like aching for growing up. And they allowed me the space to like step up and do that for a while. And it was really, really beautiful. And I think one of my favorite nights on tour, these two young Indigenous femme folks came up to me, and they were just like, I just want to say it's so cool that there's like a two femme fronted band, and you're Indigenous, like we're Indigenous too, and we want to start a band. I was like, my heart was exploding. I was like, excuse me while I cry, but I'm gonna hide it because I'm tough. I think that was one of my favorite experiences that happened with Medusa Stare, and I was like, yes, please go start a band. Like I will come see you.
It also felt like, from reading your essays anyway, it was this opportunity to like force the whiteness of the scene to recognize like you don't get to own this all by yourselves. And after telling such a beautiful story, I hate to ask you to recount this story, but I wonder if you would mind telling the story about the women outside the venue in Chicago who tried to get you and your band booted off of the ticket, because this had me like on the floor, like, dear God, women who look like me, what are we doing?
Oh no, don't apologize for this question, because I get fired up about this
Hell
question.
yeah, let's go.
But it actually is like a joyous moment. I don't know if folks in the audience can tell, but I'm a just inherently anxious person. Anxiety disorder, it's so fun. So I'm just nervous in general, a little twitchy, a little like, I warm up eventually, but I'm generally anxious. So I had run in, we were there hours before the show was going to start, and I like, squirreled away into a little bathroom to like do my ritual, put on my makeup, whisper to myself, and like take deep breaths, all the weird shit you do when you have anxiety. And my bandmates were outside in front in the venue, and overheard these two very nice, very white women arguing about, I can't believe she would do that. Why is she wearing like war paint? It's so disrespectful to like all Native Americans. And my band is sitting in the van, like smoking cigarettes, and like tuning guitars. You see how I almost arrived there. My bandmates never smoke cigars. Gross. But they're like in there hanging out and tuning guitars, smoking cigarettes, and hearing, it's a hot Chicago night. They're hearing it all. And I guess the conversation escalated to them just championing like all Native Americans. They're like, let's get them off the bill. We should go talk to the owner of the venue right now, because that is not right. And then our lead singer threw open the van door, and just so tough. Like I felt like my band really had my back that night. Threw open the van door and said, she's Coast Salish, not that it's any of your business. And you can ask her why she wears the red paint, but that's also certainly none of your business because it's part of her culture. And then just like stamped her cigarette out, and they all filed in. And I was like, I wish I could have seen it. You guys probably look like the biggest, punkest bullies in the sweetest way. And for the rest of the night, I saw the girls looking a little sheepish at me and confused. They were like, you don't look Native. Like I could see their like wheels turning, and it's like, yeah, I've been told that. Like you don't look white, but you don't look Indian. Are you Asian? Like I could just see them, like their minds melting. And I was like, yeah, have you ever seen a mixed heritage Coast Salish person? Do you want me to pull out my CIB? Like, because I will, like, if you come for me. But it we laughed about it on the drive back to the wherever we're going after Chicago because they thought they were doing something so good, right? And at least there's that. Like, let's not be culturally appropriative anymore. If a non-native person wanted to wear regalia, I'd have problems with that. I feel like most people would find that disrespectful. So I feel like the girls' hearts were in the right place, but they needed to do a little more work because that whole thing, and thank God my band shut them down, but like if they had successfully gotten us kicked off the bill, how bad would they have felt? Like, you kicked a Native woman off a platform in which she was going to speak. Good job. So that's a fun story.
The complete opposite of what they like claim to be trying to represent. And it's just like, I think it speaks to you as a person that both in the book and now you're giving them this grace of like, well, their hearts were in the right place. And I'm like, no, I don't like these people. They're giving us a bad name.
They would make a good team.
Yeah,
Come on tour with me sometime.
I like to believe I'm the girl that throws open the door and is like, first of all.
Yeah, you have that energy.
Thank you. I aspire to that. I mean, you're so open about so much in this collection and in your first book, as you said, about sexual violence that you've lived through, learning to find partners that you feel really safe with and with whom you can share and celebrate your queer and two-spirit identity. And on pages 173 to 174, you talk about wearing, quote, my sexuality, my identity as a queer person, as a high femme person, loud and proud. How did you find that space to wear that identity loud and proud and be able to fight for yourself?
Great question. I'm going to take us back to the almost ran away from the circus, ran away with the circus era, something I haven't written a lot about. But things were weird in my 20s, but I was having the best time. We performed with folks from Circus Contraption. We had this little ragtag burlesque troupe. We got to perform at like the Can and the Pink Door and other venues around Seattle. And it was just me and a gang of girls just like in full like glittery glam, like drag every night, having the time of our lives, but like dancing to like Nick Cave and like weird stuff. And we were like a very dark circus burlesque troupe. And it was a safe place for me to explore that. Like, oh, I've never put on fake nails in my life. Like, I've never worn eyelashes or glittery lipstick. And it felt like this taboo thing growing up after surviving sexual assault. There was a time in my life where my pants were so big you couldn't see my shoes. It was the 90s. It was kind of the look, and just like hiding my body because that's what I was like told that like in media in different instances, like that will keep you safe. And I hated that. I was like, no. And that's another thing that drew me to Riot Grrrl. I know that it was a flawed movement, but it also did so much empowering things. Like, I have critique of it. I'm sure everyone does. But the part about like femme empowerment when I was 14 years old, still grappling with what had happened to me, that really like inspired me and said, no, if you want to wear a vinyl corset and claws and a pink bouffant wig and dance to the Cramps, girl, get it.
Yeah.
And so learning how to embrace my hyper femininity and not be afraid of it and not be afraid to like challenge anyone about who asks me about it or pushes, because to me it's like just as tough as armor. And so I think during those burlesque years and then moving forward, I'm like kind of just embracing like high femme strength, and I do feel powerful in it. I also feel powerful in track pants and like a hoodie covered in cat hair, which glamorous writer's life. That's really the look. But yeah, just I think even in No Uravila's poem, the mountain that was asking for it, this idea that if young women present themselves a certain way, bad things are going to happen to them, has pissed me off since I was like 12 years old. So does that answer your question?
It does, and I'm feeling the rage, and I'm like, yes, say more about this. I wanted to ask about finding the space to protect yourself and wear that identity, because we're at this um really painful moment in the world where there's places in this country and all over the world where people can't wear their identities loud and proud. I think we here in Seattle take it for granted because we are, or at least we like to think of ourselves as a safe space and a welcoming community. But I think it's so great when folks can hear from folks like yourself about what it took to find that identity. And I wonder what did you need from the people around you too when you were struggling to be loud and proud about who you were? What were the ways that your community showed up for you to be able to do that?
I think what I needed was safety,
Yeah.
first and foremost,
Mm.
like safety and people I could trust. And growing up, I didn't always have that in the people around me, the adults around me, later with partners, So that was the biggest thing I needed. It seems like such a small and take for granted thing, but safety is everything. It's a dark way to answer that, but it's true.
No, and I think it resonates, and I think we're all capable of providing some measure of safety for some measure of time. So safety, folks, safety first. Again, I'm going to remind you one more time, be writing your questions down. I have just a few more and then we'll go to some audience questions, but I want to hear what you're all thinking. But now I want to talk about food, because like music, food plays a really important role in your life, especially salmon. But for a time, you were vegan and you didn't eat it. And you later described that decision as denying your, quote, salmon privilege, going back to privilege, as you mentioned. How did you reconnect with salmon for folks who haven't read the book yet?
So I was trying very hard. Like I went vegetarian when I was 11, and to the annoyance of my parents, they were like, "We're making chicken enchiladas tonight, honey," and I'm like, "I can't eat that." My mom's like, "Great. How long is this vegetarian thing gonna last?" And I was like, "I'm committed." And I was vegetarian for many, many years, and then. Reconnecting with salmon is actually one of my favorite stories ever. My dear Uncle Ron, who's like I loved him. I idolized him. He was this incredible artist, carver, dancer, and I thought he was the coolest dude on earth. And one Christmas, I was dating, I think I just call him the drummer in the book. He
Yes.
doesn't get a name. And he was vegan. And so I think I was trying to be vegan. We were eating like tofu-y cuties. Do you remember those? Do they still make those? And like, diet cheese. It was like the late 90s, early 2000s. We've come a long way since then. But anyway, that Christmas where my cousins and I are all lined up at my uncle's car in the driveway in the snow, he's like, "Come on, kids, I've got your present in the back of my car." And we're like, "What's in the back of your car?" And then one by one, he just drops this massive king salmon in our hands. And I was just like, and look, future me or like present me wants to go back to past me and just slap her upside her head, be like, "How dare you?" Because right now, like, what a gift. But I just looked at him and I said, "Uncle, I'm vegan." And he just looked at me for, it felt like a long time, saying nothing. And then he says, "What kind of Indian are you?" And just storms off. And then that was like existential crisis. Like 17-year-old Sasha or whatever was like, "Holy shit, I don't know." And so I took the salmon home, put it in the freezer, and then thought about it. I was like, "Well, I can't eat that because that would be breaking my." And I had this like inner back and forth, like this inner conflict for a couple days. And finally, I just said, "F it." I called my cousin Moss and I said, "Do you want to cook the salmon and eat it?" So he got on the bus with his salmon in his backpack and like a 6-pack of like dark winter ale, and my other cousins came over and we all just hung out, cooked the salmon, and I ate it, and I was so stoked. And I feel like that was the first step in reconnecting me with salmon. I was hanging out with like a lot of, and I have mad respect for veganism and even vegetarianism. My diet is strange. I'm like, I eat traditional foods. Like I have to ask my mom, like my roommate came home with elk that she herself had hunted. And I like called my mom. I was like, "Mom, did our ancestors eat elk?" And she was like, "Duh." And I was like, "I guess I'm eating elk tonight then." So it took a long time, but that, like my uncle dropping this like 50-pound massive king salmon into my like 17-year-old arms in the snow on Christmas stayed with me, like
Yeah.
planted this seed that anytime I'd go to a vegan potluck after that, or vegan brunch, I'd be like, in the back of my head, girl, you are supposed to be eating fish. Like you come from salmon people. And so I made peace with that. And now I eat fish all the time,
Heck yeah.
sustainably and wild caught, obviously.
Mhm.
But that was a long journey of like just another part of like getting in touch with my identity. I'm allowed to be mixed heritage. I'm allowed to be Coast Salish. I'm allowed to be a punk. I'm allowed to eat salmon. It's like this overlap. So
Yeah. Well, and it's again, like veganism can be such a white space too. That is in and of itself a lot of privilege to say, I will abstain from all of these different kinds of foods, and maybe to not think about the connection that people can have to a certain animal, certain kind of meat, the salmon.
right. And I brought my very vegan partner to one of our salmon ceremonies. They're one of my favorite to attend. They're really beautiful. It's a way that we honor our food. We honor the salmon. There's songs, there's like cedar boughs. They present, the king salmon on a cedar plank with sword ferns. It's a really beautiful ceremony. And then it's a big feast. And I wanted to bring my partner, and I said, this is really part of my culture. I know that you don't have to eat the salmon, but like it's a ceremony. And in my head, I was like, ooh, if he doesn't eat the salmon, this might not work. I was watching him, and I was like, I know you're vegan. I respect that, but you're coming to a Coast Salish salmon ceremony. And when this nice elder handed him his plate, I was like side-eyeing him like a hawk. And he said thank you and took a bite. And I was like, to be respectful and to honor my culture and to honor that salmon that gave its life for us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm figuring out ways to like eat traditionally, like
Yes.
eat the foods my ancestors would have eaten. I think it's really important.
Yeah. This is not the same thing, but I'm from Florida, and I just imagine going to a fish fry and someone getting in line and not taking the catfish. Like that would be a problem.
Everyone
Be like,
crickets,
like
record
what,
scratch.
what is happening here? Well, I have one more question before we go to our audience questions. If we could collect those, my fine folks, my fine colleagues. And I want to go back to what your uncle asked you in that moment when you said you wouldn't eat the salmon, and he said, "What kind of Indian are you?" What would you say to him today, Sasha?
I think it's actually at the end of, because I've thought about this for many, many years. Um, Actually, I can answer.
Oh,
I can
yes,
answer that.
please. Yes.
I already answered that.
You did.
Well, after thinking about it for 15 years,
It starts to stick with you, huh?
and I love that you brought it up because First Salmon Ceremony is like my second favorite essay in the book because I
Yay.
love food and I hated ever having any shame around food
Mm.
um, in different ways. The way like being in predominantly white spaces. Um, I've had, I brought my ex-husband's family fish dip that my grandma used to
Yes.
make, and I was so proud of it because I was only like 24. I didn't know what I was doing in the kitchen. I kind of still don't. Um, it's not I have other good qualities. But I learned how to make her fish dip that we always had growing up, and I was so proud of it. I unwrapped it, and it was like, ew, what's that smell? And like, I was like heartbroken and embarrassed because it's like my, partner's new partner's mom. It was so scary. Like, okay.
I was horrified for the record by that story. I was like, I could never.
I like tucked it away and hid it in the back of the fridge and like snacked on it in secret. I never want to feel that way again.
No, never.
So
anyway.
I like that question though because it thought of it at the end of this essay, kind of answer him. I thought about my uncle's question on Christmas. What kind of Indian are you? I guess I'm the kind of Indian who will never be vegan, who will never again teach herself to be hungry or quiet, the kind who will bring the smelly salmon dip into your white fridge. I am the kind of Indian who will always be bad at making fry bread, who loves picking berries and driving along the coast listening to dark wave and synth pop, I am the kind of Indian who will never hide who she is again and who will always eat the salmon as long as the salmon returns to us.
Oh, I love that. Let's give that a round of applause. Thank you. I grew up with not a lot as well, pretty, raised by a single mom, and the idea of turning your nose up to food, especially food that someone has brought into your home as a gift, is just beyond horrifying to me. So thank you for doing that. And you're welcome to bring your salmon dip anytime to anywhere.
Travel with it everywhere.
Perfect. Yes,
It'll be
exactly.
a test of character. Open it on a plane.
Yes, there we go. Do we have some questions? Beautiful. And actually, while they come, I have one more question about the salmon that I'll ask, because you've hinted at it a few times now, of like, the salmon are suffering too after generations of colonization and industrialization and just all the many terrible ways the world has changed. How has your relationship with the salmon changed since you were a kid, especially knowing what you do about them now as an adult?
I get very sad and darked out about salmon. Like, I actually wrote an entire poem about how sad I am about the salmon when I heard a speaker at a conference say there are no more salmon east of the mountain anymore. So folks in Spokane can't participate in their traditional salmon ceremonies. And that happened, it feels like, in the blink of an eye. Like, and I've heard since then, because I got really darked out and hung up on that, there are no more salmon east of the mountains. And I've talked to other folks who are saying there's restoration happening. But I get really, really darked out when I think about our oceans, the health of our oceans and waterways and rivers, and declining salmon and declining orca, because everything's connected. So when my partner and I were in Eastern Washington, we were at a park in Spokane on the river, and we kept seeing signs. I noticed them because they were in the Spokane language. And I was like, that's a Spokane language. What does it say? Let's follow it. And it said Salmon People Island. And so we ran through the park to find Salmon People Island, and it was deserted. And I just like sat down on the pavement and cried because it felt like a metaphor for the rivers and like what's happening to our waters. Like, it was just deserted.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm going to start with this lovely question from someone who says, with much love from another anxious white passing Indian. I just love that. So that's immediately. Yeah. Do you want to wave for us? Well, you don't have to. Hello. What part of your community do you think the most important in your healing journey?
I'm going to give you such a typical Gemini answer, but it's true. I think first I'll start with my ancestors, quite literally, guidance from them, what their lives, what they've lived through, the teachings they passed down. They played such a massive role in my journey of healing, which is never done, right? Someone asked me once, well, after red paint, like, you're done now, like, you're healed. And I was like, whoa, that's not how that works, bro. It's something you engage, it's something I engage with every day. And also my family and chosen family, like the people that have been there for me sometimes when my family wasn't. I feel like that's one of the most beautiful things we can create is chosen family. And like my partner, my date, my bandmates, my friends, that chosen family is so important to me, as well as my family. And yeah, I hope that answers your question.
You also write at length in the book about tulips and what they represent on this land. This person writes, every time I see tulips now, I think of your essay that changed my perspective. It's tulip season, and I wonder if it's triggering for you.
I love this question. I get it a lot. And in another life, I'm convinced I was like a gay florist for animals. I love making bouquets. I am away with the fairies constantly. I'll spend hours in my yard arranging bouquets. I once did it for these 5 incredible women. I was in, or 6, am I? Or 5 or 6 of us. There were 6 of us, and I put together, just for no particular reason, on a spring day, I made individual bouquets for all of them and pulled a card for each one. And it was just my art project. And it brought me so much joy. Like, I am a floral person. I love blooms. They make me so happy. And it's funny when I come to places and they're like, oh my God, I did this really incredible event last year, the year before with Whatcom Reads, and they set me up in a very beautiful hotel room. I got a swag bag. I was like, whoa, this is fancy. And then there was this big bouquet of tulips to welcome me. And I was like, huh. Like, I was like, I clocked it, but I was like, they're pretty. But then the next morning, the lovely, lovely woman who was taking care of me all week goes, I just got home and finished your tulips essay. I'm so sorry that we gave you tulips. And I was like, whoa, yo, it's okay. I was like, no, I love them. I don't hate tulips. I don't, I promise. That's a common misconception. I said, I will cherish these tulips. They're brightening up my room. I love every flower. The tulips in Skagit Valley represent, however, something different. Doesn't mean like if you bring me a tulip, I'm going to be like, how dare you, and like smash it. But it's more of, I'm glad that it makes you think about that though. And I think that when we travel to places, it's important to think about what was there before. I think of it all the time now, like, and that research and deep dive into Skagit Valley and the tide flats that were once there. Now, when I'm even in different countries or across town or wherever I might be, and admiring some art or some foliage, I'm like, what was originally here? I think about that a lot when I'm in Seattle too now. So I like that it brings that up for you, because that was the point of the essay. Not that Sasha taqwšəblu LaPointe hates tulips. She sets them on fire. I hate what they represent.
The tulips don't know what they've done.
Yeah, they don't know they're a flag of settler colonial triumph.
Yeah.
They didn't ask to be that.
They're just little tulips. I love this because your jewelry tonight prompted 2 different questions about your jewelry. And I like how one person put it, they'd love a jewelry tour. So can you tell us about your outfit, your jewelry, just your look, your vibe?
Absolutely. Oh my God, I love this. I'm like, let me talk about something silly like colonialism and my accoutrement. So these are really beautiful dentalium earrings that I got at the Native Ecologies of Love conference down in Albuquerque. And I got them because Pride Month was coming up, and it's dentalium and it's huge because I'm always a little bit extra. I actually toned it down tonight. I was gonna have like way more, and I was like, so I got them beautiful dentalium with pride colors and spikes at the end.
Yeah.
I feel like it perfectly encompasses my personality.
Yes.
And then I have my layered chains that I had custom made. One has my English name, one has my Skagit name, and one has Yoyabutch, which means butterfly in our language. And this one is a really beautiful piece made by Tanya Larson, who is my girl. She's coming. She was the one who's terrified to fly, and I'm gonna go meet her on the airport and make sure she gets through safely. But she made this incredible piece with a muskox horn, and she tans her own caribou hide.
Wow.
And then does her like all these vintage beads. Go check out Tanya Larson's webpage. It's fire.
Heck yeah. We'll drop a link in the show notes when we release this as a bonus episode on Sunday. So if anyone needs those links, I will find them for you. I will do the work and probably order some stuff. I'll also say I only recently got my first tattoo. It's hidden tonight, but I just want to throw in some ink love because the tattoos on your hands are also beautiful.
Thank you. Oh, I forgot one more piece of jewelry is a really beautiful shell ring that this incredible like Maori baddie gifted me when I was in New Zealand last summer. I was palling around. There's 3 of us girls, and at the last day, she gifted me, Tay, and our other friend shell rings.
It's very cool. Again, as a Florida girly, I was like, I would have loved that as a kid. This person, again, also compliments your outfit, but would like to know more about the cover design on the book.
Yeah, this one's I'm totally wrong.
Oh, here, you can have mine.
Are you sure?
Yes, of course. Here, I'll put a pouring because I
Okay.
did a
Oh,
lipstick
is it
stain.
like the Sahara Desert?
There you go. Yeah, it's all
Just
good.
a nervous thing. Okay. I was really blown away when the wonderful folks at Counterpoint, Catapult, Counterpoint, and
I've seen it done both ways. Yeah.
But there's a story, and I need to find it. Give me 2 seconds. Why is what you need to find never where it's supposed to be when you're in front of people? But at your desk, you just go right to it. The world is cool.
The universe just likes to mess with us. Know it's watching.
Like, check your phones, check TikTok.
Think about your questions. We still got time.
So I got.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Scattered Gemini. I fell in love when the art department sent me a few images. They were like, these are paintings by Maynard Johnny. He's a First Nations artist, I believe, from Vancouver, BC. And they sent me a few to choose from. And I immediately went to the Dayglow neon teal and pink. Of course, I was like, there was other beautiful ones, but I was like, that one exactly. Holy, that's it. Like no questions. And then a few weeks later, Maynard sent me a personal email, and it was so beautiful. It made me tear up. He explained the meaning of this particular piece, and I hadn't known this before. He said, I read Red Paint, and just wanted to share this with you. The particular image you chose is a thunderbird, but it's very rare that the thunderbird is painted in the feminine way. And I just like bawled at my computer and wrote him back and said, thank you so much. It was like meant to be. It was fated. So, because I didn't know that. I was just like teal and pink. But it's my favorite cover, I think, out of the 3 books.
It's really beautiful. I remember getting it back in 2024. A copy was sent to me and I opened it and I was like, yes, I don't even need to know anything else. This book is going to be in the book club. Well, let's do our last audience question because I think this is a good one. What are you working on now / next?
Oh. Someone, you thought this was a good one? It's like the most terrifying thing to ask a writer.
That's why it's great.
Well, as a true, sorry, water break. As a truly unhinged Gemini, I have multiple projects going. I just finished a 3rd draft of a novel I've been working on for like 2 years called Little Boats.
Oh.
So it's a little Easter egg from Red Paint. That first failed manuscript, that memoir. I'm fictionalizing it, and I've been working on it for like 2.5 years. And I've been working on it with my editor, and I just got my feedback. A couple more things to do, but I got really good remarks. So I'm just cranking away at that and crossing my fingers that Little Boats will be in the world soon. And I'm also working on beachy collection of poems. Every time I want to write like a happy book, it just doesn't happen. But I started writing beach poems as a Coast Salish person, very connected to the water, like emotionally and spiritually. It has meant something to me my entire life. And so I wanted to write about that. I also, in the past few years, fell in love and married a surfer. So I wanted to write these happy little beach poems about like loving the ocean and loving a surfer. But then, the more you look at the ocean, I started getting really upset. And I was like, oh, these are not happy little beach poems. They're everything about like declining salmon, rising temperatures, blowing up dams. It took a turn. But that's what I'm working on. Little boats and a book I'm loosely calling Rip Current right now.
How very punk of you. I like that. It's just dam explosions and
Yeah.
oh, look at the beach. It's so nice.
Like, I'm
Again,
gonna
Floridian. I feel ya.
I'm gonna try to like, weave them together. Like, sure, here's
Yeah.
a love poem about a surfer. The next one's about blowing up a dam.
Those are very related. I don't know what you're talking about. Love is explosive. All right, I do have one final question for you, Sasha, because on page 223, you write, quote, "It's exhausting being inspiring, being strong." So I really hope I haven't exhausted you tonight.
No.
Okay, good. But okay, so maybe a better question then is just how are you doing? How are you feeling? How is life?
I love that quote though, because you just like sent me back in time. Like I just had a ratatouille moment. I was like zapped back into like sitting on the stairs at Evergreen. I had just started, and Tay Tibble, the Maori poet who I adore, was coming to visit me. We were doing some readings together, and she came out of the goodness of her heart to talk with my creative writing class, and they loved her. And we were like 3 hour session, like da 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 da, like ideas flying. It was super great. We talked about really heavy stuff. We talked about like assimilation, colonialism, genocide, all the fun stuff you talk about in an Indigenous writing class. But it was such a good session, and we went out onto the deck, like the stairwell, and we're both just vaping into the night. And I just remember it so clearly. We were like, "Oh, that was great," and then because I think in that moment I was trying to say it is so important to do this work and to have these conversations, but we were both kind of cracking up about it's also exhausting.
Mm.
So just blowing like cherry rainbow vape cloud into the beautiful Pacific Northwest to deal with it. But how am I doing now? I'm okay. I'm excited about the two new Gemini book projects. Um, I think the hardest thing for me right now is trying to find time to carve out for myself for writing.
Yeah.
Um, I work at the Native Pathways program, which is super awesome. It's like such a gift to be able to be teaching like emerging Native writers or oh my God, I cracked up when I heard we were playing Medusa Stair and also kudos to you, thank you. But just last week, one of our students presented his project, and I was so blown away. Kid had done his homework. He had our other weird experimental band that me and Kari were in was called Fleur de Louve, like Flower of the Wolf. And our student comes in and presents, and I was like, how did you? I knew right away he had titled his project Flower of the Wolf, but in his macaw language.
Whoa.
And I was just like, oh, my heart. Like, I was like, I'm not crying. Also, we're like not a very good band, so please, you found the title, leave it at that. But how beautiful that he was like, yeah, I found your band, and I liked the name, and so I wrote it in my own traditional macaw language, and I was like, my heart's exploding.
Yeah.
So teaching is like super rad, and I think also just keeps you busy, and I'm just trying to like find time. Like I need to apply for some residencies. I have kiddos living at the house now, which is a massive change. So it's like I'm good, but I'm just trying to find time to write, which is like the most boring writer answer ever.
No.
Everyone says it, but like that's the only thing I'm trying to figure out.
It's deeply relatable.
Okay, good.
But it sounds, again, I'm really going to emphasize it sounds like you are a language warrior in your
Oh,
own way, Sasha.
thank you.
And thank you for all of your work, your writing, your music, teaching the next generation. And most importantly, thank you for being with us this evening. Sasha taqwšəblu LaPointe, author of Thunder Song. Yeah. Give it up. My goodness. Yeah, that was really fun. Hell yeah. Thank you. Well, and thank you again to KUOW's live event sponsors, Finney Ridge Painting and Microsoft, for their support. And a huge thank you to the folks at Seattle Public Library and the Seattle Public Library Foundation for being our partner. And thank you to the KUOW crew. We've got Charlotte, Amelia, and Hans here. And oh no, you're new. I'm so sorry. I'm the worst person. I just did that to myself. Thank you to everybody for being here. This was really special. And I hope to see you all at our next event on April 23rd, when I'll be speaking with Molly Olguin about her short story collection, The Sea Gives Up the Dead. You can find details at kuow.org/events. Finally, our friends from Third Place Books are here tonight with copies of Sasha's books. Please grab a copy, stick around, have them signed. We'll be here till about 8:30-ish to chat with y'all. So thank you so much. Let's do it again sometime soon.